First of all, thank you to all four of you guys. Everything was really interesting. I loved every single thing you said. So let's tackle the questions. The first one is a zero carbon world realistic? I will let you, any of you who want to talk about this, if you have any ideas, maybe James, it seems.
Yeah, sure. I was actually first going to ask if they saw my message in the chat about the Plastics Pact, but that's something just to check out later on, because they're international, but they support regional initiatives if you want to set something up. And they're out of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who do a lot of research into the circular economy. So they've just started rolling out in South Africa, Portugal, other places, so it could be a useful resource. But in response to your question, I would say no, but it's not a pessimistic response or doom and gloom. I just think by virtue of living and being and moving, eating, we'll always consume carbon, and it's just, can we get to a state of putting enough of it back in the ground through various means that we can mitigate as much climate change as possible, not halt or reverse, but hopefully mitigate, and slow down the rate of change so that we can adapt if it's slow enough and that sea level doesn't rise enough too fast, or that climates in certain regions change too quickly. But I do believe now that this year has been a massive turning point. We've seen a lot of changes coming from individual actors, but now blocks like the European Union are really getting behind it, and we're finally seeing the financial sector and insurance and investment, most importantly, really actually care about climate risk, and really disclosing what a company has to disclose their climate risk. That's so critical for this, because money is what drives the world. So, of course, it is very important the actions that we take and you take, because it could be your grandfather or your father or your grandmother or your mother that are sitting on those boards of the important executive committees that are making certain decisions, but still that it's finances that will be driving it. So it's quite a long-winded answer. Not to be pessimistic, I still think that we should be hopeful and determined, as Jordan was saying earlier, but I don't know if it's possible.
And I can just add to that. So James said it really well. I think that at least slowing down the rate at which we are currently moving will have an impact, because we already seen it with in April, when basically the whole world stops. We immediately had these examples from all over the world where nature is thriving because of slower people's activity. So I think that this is kind of the one positive aspect of this whole pandemic thing. Sadly, we have also the other part, which is now leading to a lot of pollution with masks specifically, which is turning out to be quite bad. But at the same time, we saw this bright example, and it proved that when we kind of slow down our pace, then nature thrives and good things are happening.
So thank you very much. We will go to the second question, which I find really interesting, and I really want to know what you guys think from your different perspectives. One of the listeners is interested in soft pressure tactics towards municipal authorities for providing conditions for urban gardens. So I know that these urban gardens are common in some countries. I think in Germany, they are becoming more common. I know that in some cities in Spain, there are like some groups of people are trying to promote them. But I would like to know your perspectives on this. How can it be addressed? How can authorities be addressed in a local level to promote these urban gardens in different places? Because it's not the same Scotland, for example, as the States or as Bulgaria. So what do you guys think?
I'm happy to let someone else go first. If Jordan wants to take it from the American perspective.
Jordan can, yeah.
Sure. I'll just say, I think, like I mentioned before, the most important thing is people. I think if you amass enough people who are interested in the same outcome, who all are able to get the same information, I think that creates immense change. I think you can create great leverage in getting people to provide more services and anything like that. I really do think communicating with people around you who you think have similar or even different views is wildly important.
Thank you so much. Maybe Anna and Stoicho can...
From Bulgarian point of view, kind of this communication with municipalities can be a bit tiring, as I mentioned. But I think that you have organizations on a local level that you can always turn to and ask for advice on how to handle such situations. For example, if you would like to have something change within your local area, then you always have organizations that are doing stuff on a local level that you can just turn to them, ask a question, how do you go about this? And you always get great advice. So I think that this kind of makes it easier for people to come about real change, and it's the way to go as a first step, sort of.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I only moved back to Scotland 6 weeks ago, so I'm jumping between two different countries. I remember reading somewhere, and somebody correct me if this is wrong, that in Russia they have an enormous level of homegrown production of food, and it used to be the same in the UK, especially wartime. Families had to support themselves, and we've seen a huge move away from that with the development of industrial farming. And likewise, I think, or what I was saying earlier about this being kind of year of change and people are kind of waking up, and we're starting to see like vertical urban farms are becoming a thing, or very high-tech advanced farming in a warehouse or in a building where the air is just, the water is recycled and everything is controlled, and waste is minimal, energy is minimal, transport's minimal. We're seeing that cities are starting to take action in that regard. And I'd hope that it'll trickle down even further as we see through the pandemic as well, on the personal level, that people like to take care of their surroundings and they like to have hobbies and things to do on their balcony because they might be stuck in their flat again or their apartment, wherever you are. And on a municipal level, I'd hope it would be supported. The only issue might ever be with space, with availability, especially in more heavily built up urban areas. And that's why in places like the Netherlands, you're seeing a kind of explosion in these urban vertical farms, because you don't have the land to make new gardens, or if you're lucky if you've already got a garden spot or a shed or something. So maybe somewhere like Scotland, we're probably going to be in a good spot, but we don't have the sun yet. Maybe we'll get it in a few years. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, guys. Really nice answers. And the last question that I have from the people who asked questions before the event, and then we will go on to the ones in the chat. Easy everyday things we can do to save the environment. Maybe our friends from EcoSwitch know about that.
Sorry, Lydia, can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. Easy everyday things we can do to save the environment. So everyday changes, or what are your tips?
Easy little things, tips and tricks.
There are actually so many things that you can do on a daily basis. We would have to.
First one is follow EcoSwitch, so you can get inspiration from there. Joking aside, I think there are a bunch of things that are actually quite easy. We had people sharing with us that it's quite difficult. I can't get used to it, but actually building a new habit of, for example, taking a cloth bag with you is quite easy. You can always put it in your backpack or in your car, or it's small things that can actually be used to avoid tons of plastic. So if a person uses like on average 200 or 300 plastic bags per year, imagine if we just take a single bag and carry it with us all the time. We don't see this as a very difficult. For example, if you need to make your own toothbrush paste, it's quite difficult. We see that a lot in zero waste, and it's a bit more time consuming, and it takes more effort to make it, but there are actually a lot of easy things that can be done. Or taking a reusable cup with you, or a bottle. Lydia is showing that it actually leads to drinking more water, which is healthier. A lot of benefits that come from easy, affordable alternatives.
And I think that what is especially easy in today's world is that you have this information around you everywhere. So if you could use social media for that and just try and get yourself in certain groups where people are sharing examples of their everyday life, saying, look, I did this in that way and it's really working for me. Then this kind of creates this community of exchange. And it's so many easy steps can be taken. Just it's about coming up with this habit of living, and the first step is to realize the huge potential which is there. We are living in this throwaway culture where everything gets disposed in minutes. It's not really needed, and small steps taken by many people can lead to huge changes. So I would say that if you use social media for that, and you see other people doing it, and this kind of empowers you to even do it more, and it stimulates you. So maybe that's one easy step that everyone can do in today's world.
I really liked those points and totally agree with loads of them. The only one I would debate is the toothpaste one, because my girlfriend bought 1,000 of these little pills. It's now toothpaste that we have to take every night. And it's just, you chew it in your teeth, and it just, I miss the Colgate bottle so much. And I know it's plastic, but every time I chew these little things, I'm like, oh, this is not toothpaste.
We can suggest tablets which are really working.
That's what I need, but I can't be wasteful, so I still have 900. I still have 936 I need to finish, but then I'll hit you up when those are finished. But I think another cool thing, because there's loads of practical examples that you shared, which I'm totally behind in, and maybe it's also a case of thinking like, why do you want to do this? And of course, everyone wants to be good and help the environment and look after the planet for future generations and so forth. But I think really sitting down and thinking, why do I want to do these things? Why do I want to take responsibility? Why does character matter? And making these decisions matter. And then hopefully through developing that really clear objective of, okay, in this amount of time, I want to be zero waste, or wherever you want to take yourself, because you have the strong reasoning behind you, then you can slowly just chip away at things. There's so many things like in your diet, eating locally, trying to eat plants. I found that one quite tricky. I went vegan 3 times before I finally cracked it, except sometimes I go fishing. Eating locally, transport, trying not to fly. We're quite lucky we're all stuck at home. I can see lots of bedrooms at the moment, so we're nobody's going anywhere. Where you put your money, I guess none of us are really at that stage yet about pensions, but making sure that your pension fund is green, because really that's, again, where the money goes in the world is where we'll see growth. And lots of other things. Like, I'm very lucky, I'm quite lazy with clothes. So the shirt I've been wearing at work, I've been wearing for like 3 years, and I just can't be bothered changing it. So it makes me sustainable, I guess. But it's more of a laziness thing than anything else. But yeah, I think leaning on other people, now after this call, I know that I can check out what they've been sharing, EcoSwitch, and I can learn more tips and tricks. And having met Lydia at the round table, I feel like I'm opening this network, and it makes it more acceptable and normal, because it's becoming a social norm, as Jordan was saying. So I really think working together as a team and learning from each other is way forward.
Absolutely true.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, I would also say I think it really, the actions you can take depend so much on like who you are and what your daily activities are. There's not necessarily a guidebook for specifically all the things we should do. And I think a lot of the great actions I've seen taken have come from being influenced by other people. So I know my like first editor when I was writing the book was really into eco activities and stuff like that. And she would post anytime she like had figured something new out on Facebook. And so she had created this community of people who she would get ideas from, and she would share her ideas. So she's in Florida, and so she would end up using like the rainwater from excess rain to clean her car or fill her toilet. And like weird little things like that she had learned from other people and that she was then like putting back into the world, I think is like so incredible. I think another big thing is engaging with organizations who do this kind of work, because it really helps amplify your voice and your ability to create change. As was mentioned earlier, there's so many great activities that you can participate in, but I think any way that you can influence other people to not pressure them to do anything like go vegan, because I've also tried, it's really hard, but just creating a culture in which you're just sharing ideas and whatever other people think they can fit into their life is just widely available.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that create. Sorry, yeah, Albena.
Yeah, can I just kind of add a follow-up question to that question, because I think it's really interesting, and I've been thinking of ways to be more eco-friendly in my lifestyle for the past year. I really kind of appreciate the message from all of the speakers about the strength in numbers. I think there were quite a few occasions where I was on an airplane way before COVID, the good old times, and I would ask for tea on the airplane, and I would give them my reusable bottle. So the air hostess would, she put the tea in a paper cup, and then from the paper cup into my bottle, and I was just like, what just happened? So in a way, it was kind of like, I think you still meet people who are climate change deniers, and who are kind of more on the side of this is a hoax or it's not our problem, etc. But just to meet people who completely do not understand what it's about, like to the point where it's not only you don't necessarily agree with it or you can't be bothered, but like to not even understand kind of the concept of like you need to take those steps was quite shocking. So I think from that perspective, it is really important what everyone was saying in terms of saying no to plastic things or bringing your own bags and less consumerism. I think sends a strong message. I'm still working on that one with Black Friday coming up, but in general, kind of buying less things is a good thing. But I guess my follow-up question, I guess the way I think about climate activism is on three main levels. So one is changing your day-to-day life, which does impact company decisions, etc. But then I think there is the bigger point of the two other levels are trying to impact companies more directly. It's almost you need to push them, not just shame them into it, but like you need to push them into it. And then the final is like you need decision makers on a political level to act on those things, because as many plastic straws as we're denying on a day-to-day basis, at the end of the day, that's the important stuff. So with this very long introduction, I guess what are the ways that you would recommend to get to play a more active role on those two other levels? So whether that's pushing companies into going, where is your energy coming from? Like, are you using clean energy to produce whatever you're producing? And to push governments into, is there other ways outside of voting? Obviously, should we be harassing the food or environmental or whatever it is to be more active? So yeah, what are the ways outside of our day-to-day life and choices that we could be doing to be more active, is my question.
Well, I think that you've mentioned a lot, and really what you said is absolutely true. I just don't think that it's for everyone, but whoever would like to kind of push certain business in a certain area that it's even easier than one might think, because it's really an email, and you have even organizations in Bulgaria which are providing a template that you can use for that. You can just copy and paste the text and just send it out, and it is working. We've done it even in Facebook. We've written to huge companies in Facebook asking them why these apples are packed in plastic packaging, and they are getting back to us. So nowadays it's easier than ever to do it. You have social media, you have this social proof, which is really important for every business. So no one really wants to see on their Facebook profile, people coming up to them and saying stuff. So from business perspective, they would like to avoid that. So they always tend to answer the questions and tend to do something. So when it comes to companies, I think that it's easier than one might think. It's an email, it's social media. When it comes to the government, of course, you would have to know on local level which organizations are doing what. For example, the food safety agency in Bulgaria, we just took their email, write them an email, they got back to us. It's this, you kind of have this direct interaction with them, and then I believe that it's really its strength in numbers. Yes, it was already said, because you can't really do it on your own, but you don't have to do it on your own. You can do your part, and that is, I think, more than enough. Just going to them and asking for stuff. And if then 100 more people do it after you, I'm sure that this will create this chain effect, which will lead to some changes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I've been in so many similar situations where it's not necessarily that there's someone who's like actively a climate denier or they don't understand the situation. A lot of it is just like company protocol when you get on an airline is to hand you the tea bag and they have to give you a separate cup for the straw. It's like the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And I think our generation, and I think the movement right now is really breaking down a lot of those norms and a lot of those procedures, being like, well, why do we need that? That doesn't seem that reasonable. Like, it's not really a health or safety issue. I also think you brought up a good point of like shaming companies. I think there's been so much shaming of companies recently, but for the wrong things. And I think there's a difference between shaming and like encouraging innovation and innovative solutions. For example, there's like, I think in the US and many other places, we had this like plastic straw revolution to a certain extent. There was a video a few years ago of a turtle who got a straw like lodged in its nose. And it was like horrific to watch. And basically what came out of that was people demanding the end of plastic straws. But what no one really accounted for is, number one, plastic straws are like the tiniest part of plastic waste generally. And so on one hand, it's like, yes, it's a starting point, but not if you're going to make it this politicized. And so like, basically people were pushing companies to take out plastic straws. And so they put in all this activism, all this movement, and like a lot of companies did announce that they were taking away plastic straws. But there's things like Starbucks announced that it was going to remove plastic straws from all their locations, but they're going to replace them with plastic lids. So like that doesn't, their point was, well, the recycling system can now capture these, whereas they couldn't actually capture the small straws. So it was just so much effort from people for this like minuscule thing that happened. And I think that's really painful for people to see that they put in all this work and not that much happens. And so I think we need to be, when we are pushing companies to do the right thing, focusing on the right actions. Plastic straws is not that much of a big plastic issue. It's pretty minuscule. I think focusing more on like, how do we enforce companies to innovate? How do we have them like from within think, okay, how do we move towards having like a plastic-less future? Do we need all these straws in cups and lids and stuff like that? And I think it's not an easy answer. I think it has to do with a lot of culture within companies and innovation, but I think questioning people on why we need certain things is really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, sorry, just to answer that, I think I remember it was something with McDonald's, and like they got super shamed for the way they handled the straws. I fully agree with that, and this is why I think this is kind of a very minor thing. So when I was shaming is probably the wrong word, though some companies might deserve it, others less so. What I was more thinking of is kind of a more global approach to not specifically that one aspect of that one thing, but like more globally. Is the energy you're using? This is usually the biggest kind of CO2 consumption. Is the energy that companies are using for production, is that renewable, for example? Is the process sustainable in one way in terms of the raw materials they're getting, and all of these things kind of on a more global level?
Exactly, and I think a lot of companies are moving towards that. They're not doing it in the most beneficial way. It's a lot of like benchmarking to see what other companies are doing. I know in my like part-time job right now, it's even working within sustainability, it's so much benchmarking and seeing what other companies are doing to make sure we're like reporting the right way. But I do think just the global like ideas that we've created around sustainability and ESG are important to us, and for that reason we are having to challenge company cultures. And I think that's leads to your question about like bigger, like, oh, where does your energy come from?
Thank you so much, Albena, for your question as well. Now I want to move on to the ones on the chat. Sarah asked a very interesting and complete question, which is, what is the role of grassroots movements in driving the urgency of taking action on climate change and environmental protection? It seems like mass movements are on the rise, organizing direct action to address the ways people are directly affected through disruption and political pressure, from the dam protests in the Balkan River defense in Bosnia to the tree-sitters in Danengrad forest in Germany, pollution protests in Sarajevo, etc. How do the power of these movements intersect with the other examples of green business and political leadership? So once again, the main question I think is, what is the role of grassroots movements in driving the urgency for taking action in climate change?
I can maybe give one small example. I can't speak so much to, I can't even remember the name, Extinction Rebellion and other really grassroots. And I definitely feel like that's had an effect through, just widespread media. But there's an organisation called the 2050 Climate Action Group in Scotland, and they are just volunteers who want to spend their time disseminating knowledge and leadership skills for young people to get more involved in climate change and engaged, and trying to relay some of the knowledge that they have to politicians. And I know that they're going to be joining the Conference of Parties COP26, which is the International Climate Change, the UN Climate Change Conference. And I know they've only been around for a few years. So I can see that at the bottom your question was how it intersects with green business and political leadership. And I think that's a great example of seeing that it's a small organization, volunteers of over 100 people who are just spending a few hours a month, if that, and how they've reached the stage of COP26 and taking an active role in something like that, which is bringing together world leaders and businesses. But I don't know if anyone has more concrete ideas around things like Extinction Rebellion, because I think it would be really interesting to hear if there's a voice from organizations like that, other than the stunts that they do and making people in the streets with pig's blood, which I think is definitely achieving things, but it's not conversations with green business or political leadership, that's for sure.
Yes, I think
Anna's got the answer.
Yeah.
Here we go. Perfect.
No, I don't have the answer, but I have another question which is close to the one of Sarah, so that I would like also to ask, let's say, these questions not only to the speakers, but probably to the whole audience. I'm a political scientist, and as Sarah, so that I look at the topic mainly from the perspective of civic mobilization, so that I appreciated very much, let's say, the two perspectives you were dealing with, mainly. So a change in lifestyles from one side, and businesses and innovation in both, let's say. But let's say the civic mobilization, according to me, is also a crucial perspective. And my question really to all of you, because most of you, all of you are young, let's say, people, and most of you are civic activists or experts on civic activism. So that I see a kind of a political paradox on environmental climate policy. So the European Commission and the new leadership of the European Commission established as the highest priority. It was before the pandemic, but I guess it would be the case after the pandemic. Let's say the green transition, the Green Deal, as the top priority of the European policy for the next mandate. From another side, let's say there is Greta Thunberg, who is pushing and criticizing all the time, let's say, leaders at all levels, so global but also European national level, for their inaction, for their inefficiency, etc., etc. So what I see as a paradox is that the same priority is defined and it is supported, let's say, from the two, let's say, sides, so from policies, not so much politics, but policy side, and let's say from the civic activism side, but they do not seem to go together, but they are conflicting. So if I stop, let's say, this is a very long introduction, I would articulate into questions. Is it the same goal, or they are different ones from the two sides? And second, why young people distrust so profoundly, let's say, political leaders? Is it only because of age, as James suggested, that they are unable to understand, let's say, the priorities of the young generation, or what are really the reasons? So when the goals are similar, there is still a very deep distrust in political leadership. I stop here. Sorry for the very long question.
So if anyone wants to go in for that one, not only from our participants, but anyone else in the audience that would like to answer. I can start by saying, oh, sorry, James, I just cut you, but just 1 second, that I think it's maybe we have the same ultimate goal, like activists and governments or international organizations, the same goal, but we believe in different measures. For example, I know about this, the latest thing with Greta Thunberg, that she was criticizing the common agrarian policy from the European Union. The European Union passed a couple